On August 23, 1942, the German Sixth Army reached the banks of the Volga River. Ahead of them lay Stalingrad. What followed would become the bloodiest battle in the history of warfare. By the summer of 1942, Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union had been underway for more than a year. Hitler's original plan to destroy Soviet forces west of the Dnieper River had failed. The Red Army had retreated, but it had not collapsed. Now Hitler launched Case Blue, a new offensive aimed at the oil fields of the Caucasus. Stalingrad was a secondary objective, a city of 500,000 people on the Great Bend of the Volga, an industrial center producing tanks, artillery, and weapons for the Soviet war machine. But it bore Stalin's name. That made it impossible for either side to yield it without catastrophe. General Friedrich Paulus commanded the Sixth Army, over 300,000 men, supported by a vast Luftwaffe fleet and the armored strength of the German 4th Panzer Army. Facing him was the Soviet 62nd Army under General Vasily Chuikov. Stalin issued Order 227, not one step back. Retreat was punishable by execution. Penal battalions were assigned to the most dangerous sectors. Political commissars watched the line. There was no middle ground between victory and death. On August 23, the Luftwaffe attacked Stalingrad in one of the most concentrated air raids of the entire war. Over 40,000 civilians died in the firestorm. The city burned for days. Then the ground troops moved in. What the Germans expected to be a rapid assault became something unprecedented. Chuikov understood that his only chance of survival was to press his men as close to the Germans as possible, to deny the Luftwaffe safe bombing runs, to turn every street into a killing ground. The Soviets called this tactic hugging the enemy. The Germans called it Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats. The battle became a contest for individual buildings. Soldiers fought for the grain elevator, the tractor factory, the central train station. Paulus's men captured the station 13 times. The Soviets took it back 13 times. A single apartment block, Pavlov's house, was held by a Soviet garrison of fewer than 30 men for 60 days against repeated German assault. Life expectancy for a Red Army soldier arriving in Stalingrad was measured in hours. In November 1942, Georgy Zhukov, the architect of the Soviet defense, launched Operation Uranus. Two Soviet army groups struck the weaker Axis flanks north and south of Stalingrad, punching through Romanian lines that were not equipped or positioned to resist a major assault. By November 23, the Sixth Army was encircled. 330,000 men were trapped inside a shrinking pocket in the ruins of a burning city. Hitler ordered Paulus to hold. Paulus appealed for permission to break out. Hitler refused. The Sixth Army would be supplied by air. It could not be. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein attempted to relieve the encirclement from the south. Operation Winter Storm was stopped 60 miles short of the pocket. The Luftwaffe's air bridge, which would have needed to deliver 500 tons of supplies per day, managed barely a fraction of that. Through December and January, the men of the Sixth Army starved. They ate their horses. They died of typhus, dysentery, and frostbite at temperatures of -30 degrees. Paulus sent message after message to Hitler. Each was denied. Hold. On January 31, 1943, Friedrich Paulus surrendered. Hitler had promoted him to field marshal just 2 days before, knowing no German field marshal had ever been taken prisoner, believing it would force Paulus to take his own life. Paulus surrendered anyway. On February 2, the last German resistance ended. Of the 330,000 men who had been encircled at Stalingrad, roughly 91,000 survived to be taken prisoner. Most were marched east into Soviet captivity. Of those 91,000, only around 6,000 would eventually return to Germany. The last of them came home in 1955. The cost of Stalingrad was almost beyond comprehension. Germany and its Axis partners lost more than 800,000 men across the campaign. The Soviet Union suffered over 1 million military casualties. The city itself was reduced to rubble. Over 1 million civilians died. The battle consumed 6 months, and every day of it was measured in thousands of dead. From Stalingrad forward, the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front never returned to Germany. The Wehrmacht never again mounted a major strategic offensive in the East. Within 2 years, Soviet forces would be fighting their way through the suburbs of Berlin. Stalingrad did not end the war, but it ended any possibility of Germany winning it. The Battle of Stalingrad remains the largest, deadliest, and most consequential urban battle in recorded history. It tells us what happens when two regimes decide that a single city must be held at any price. Buildings become fortresses, streets become graveyards, and the soldiers inside understand, long before the commanders do, that there is no way out.